All right. So I just want to jump right into it with I'll sort of go out of order with your movies.
Yeah.
And one that I really want to talk about, which just happens to be the one I saw most recent, and it blew me away, was Harry Brown. I mean,
Okay.
personally, I love crime thrillers, and Michael Caine and the crime thrillers sort of, to me, screams out Get Carter and sort of the earlier days in the 70s, the violence,
Yeah.
the grittiness of it. And Harry Brown, I mean, for all the decades we've had of watching violence on movies and sort of the film noir, the grittiness on movies, Harry Brown still delivers. There's no way you can be too desensitized for a movie like that, and you capture a lot of it on screen in a way that, as the audience, makes you feel very uncomfortable, which is the intended goal of a movie like that. When you were sort of thinking, putting together that movie, making your decisions, what sort of movies were you watching, paintings, photographs? What was the idea that you had that you sort of wanted to recreate visually for the modern neo noir that is Harry Brown?
I think it's a while ago that we did that. So I'm sure we watched, obviously working with somebody like Michael Caine, you watched like Get Carter,
Hmm.
some of this Harry Palmer film. But then also for Collateral might have been a little bit of an influence at the time. Uh, we um, also then city photography, because that was my first digital movie, and it was not a job, but it was purely budget reasons why we went that direction. But
Hmm.
then we wanted to change and check and see what's possible with that format. And it's like always when I start a film, is you can watch all the best films you can come up with, but you don't control too much on smaller budgets. You don't control too much what you're shooting. Sometimes you can't. And
Hmm.
I was intrigued when we found those locations. Uh, the social housing area was a huge area where not many people lived. They tore it down shortly after we shot there, and it was just the natural light there. I loved a lot. And what we did then was, when we started shooting, we walked away a little bit from film lighting. We pushed the camera to a very high ISO number. We shot master primes, I think.
Wait, what's that? What's that?
And I never
You
we
shot what
on
lenses were you shooting on?
Arri master primes. So
All
it's
right.
high speed lenses,
Mm-hmm.
and we pushed the camera to its limits in sensitivity. So we shot with very very little light, and that allowed. So like sometimes on films when you shoot nights, you see where the money ends, you see where the lighting ends, and then within that world you shoot your scenes. But on Harry Brown you don't have that so much, because you see whatever the city gives you, because we
Mm-hmm.
went to that extreme, and that created part of the look, and that became something very special and very much of its own.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of the orange and greenish light. It's based on what we found when we saw those locations, and then we added to that.
Mm-hmm. Now, when making a crime thriller like that, obviously you never want to have to be dealing with budgetary issues, but it sort of, did it push you to be grittier? Did it sort of fit the format of the movie?
Um, I mean, what do you mean by format? Format?
What I'm saying is the fact that you didn't have everything accessible,
Yeah.
w- and this obviously being a very gritty movie, did it sort of feel like, okay, you have to show more with what you're able to, and like you were saying, you had to push for the speed to open up the lenses and push the camera to its limit, and sort of let the grittiness and the dirtiness speak for itself on screen.
I think that becomes from the places we chose to shoot,
Hmm.
and then I think I remember when Collateral came out, it was amazing because you could shoot anywhere at night, and that was digital, and they showed so much of the city where you go like, yes, this is real, because you don't light the city for it. You just go anywhere you want. And then we took a little bit of that on board for Harry Brown, and we just took a lot of stills at night and said, this is how we want this. We want this to be as real as possible, and as gritty as those places are, because a lot of those social housing in England is not very nice.
Yeah, well, you mentioned the building was torn down after you finished shooting it, so it sort of feels like it was there just for the movie. You were fortunate enough to be able to take advantage of it while it was still around. How
Yeah.
natural was the transition into the digital filmmaking? Because
Oh,
yeah.
it was early days of digital. So we tested at the time. I think we tested Panavision Genesis. We tested the Arid camera, and that was before Alexa. So it was D21.
Mm-hmm.
And that couldn't hold up at night. And the Sony was basically a step ahead of the Genesis. It was everything the Genesis was, but then a little bit of update. But it was cumbersome. It was big. We recorded to tape. Cameras were big and heavy, and it was a little bit of and also at the time it was sometimes you would. How you get sometimes moire effects and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You would not get it where you expect it, but you would get other things where you don't expect it. So it was always a little bit like, okay, um, um, it was not my first choice, but it was what we had to do the film, and then we embraced it.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely worked. And to compare to another film you made, which I think is one of the most beautiful films ever shot, Control, which was filmed in 35 millimeter, and you filmed it in color, I believe, and then it
Yes.
was graded to black and white. Uh, so, what was sort of the contrast in the way you would visualize and execute the cinematography between the two?
Oh, very different stories. The I guess one of the big differences is that in Harry Brown we wanted to show really how gritty and how rough these certain areas of England can be. It could be anywhere in England. It could be a different city. It's London, but it doesn't really matter. And in Control, we wanted to recreate something from the 70s and 80s, and so we were probably more careful in choosing locations on Control, because again we didn't have much money, and we Anton the director said, limit your choices, and I think there's some wisdom to that. Some of the most beautiful films we think of are quite simple. And now modern days there's so much technology available, but if you've seen Control recently, you realize there's one Steadicam shot and there's one crane shot in there, and they stand really out because we didn't have any other.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those movies because when you think of black and white films in the I say modern era after sort of the 60s when color became standard, you have Raging Bull, you have Lenny by Bob Fosse, and even Roma just came out this year in black and white. So it sort of seems whenever a black and white movie comes out, it reminds the audience now that a story can be told with black and white. It wasn't just the fact that color processing was so difficult. And my question is the fact that it was shot in color and then graded to black and white. How does that change the way you sort of light it and look at the shots? Was there a specific reason why you chose to shoot it in color as opposed to black and white directly?
Oh yeah, because we tested black and white film stocks, and the thing was that there was so little stuff shot on black and white that we used Kodak film stock, but There was not much black and white stock available, and the black and white stocks hadn't been developed because not many people were using them anymore. So we didn't want the grain of the black and white stock. We didn't want the film to feel dated or coming from a different era. We wanted to shoot it in black and white, but have a more modern feel to it. That's why we didn't shoot black and white film stock. And we tested it, but it was so grainy. It was always clear that it would be a black and white film, but we didn't want to, we didn't want the grain to get into. We didn't want that to play a part of it.
Now, when you were sort of filming the movie, did you think in terms of other black and white movies, or were you thinking how, because the era that we're already in, how it would sort of play to an audience conditioned to watch movies filmed in color?
I don't know. I didn't see. The thing was, I had done some work with Anton Corbijn before, music videos maybe. We had done some black and white work. A lot of his most iconic photographs are black and white. And one of the things is you would expect from his photographs, you would expect, if you translate that into film, that would have been a grainy, very hard contrast film. And I think Anton made a conscious choice that that's not what he wanted to do. So we tried to give it more of a contemporary feel. I think stuff I looked at maybe might have been The Man Who Wasn't There by the Coen Brothers from
The Man Who Wasn't There.
Yeah, that one might have been one I watched at the time.
And there was another movie that was also filmed in color and then graded for black and white.
Which one was that?
The Man Who Wasn't There by the Coen brothers.
Oh, yeah, but they, if you see, for example, they had the luxury to afford a high contrast print, and so when you had seen that one in the cinema, you would have seen a really high contrast black and white print. Now, when Control was released, that was another layer of complication, because when the film, that was when you still had film prints in cinemas, they could never print in black and white on black and white film stock, so it would translate again to film to color stock, but with a black and white image on color stock, it's very sensitive. It's very tricky to get that really black and white. That's a pure cost thing, and maybe it's
and that's something that obviously wouldn't be a problem in the digital age with digital prints.
No, not anymore, because then you get really black and white. But if you had, if you try to get black and white out of a color film stock, and your bath is a little bit off, you might get black and white with a green tint or with a yellow tint or something. So it's more complicated to get that way. And I know that, that might have been a different story for Coen Brothers than for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was interesting. I think what other black and white films? I mean, one of my all-time favorite black and white films is the French the Au bout de souffle from
Breathless. Yeah.
Yes. And that in that one, I love that it's so natural and so it feels so natural and effortless.
Yeah, it's sort of, there was an era where black and white was just out of necessity, and at some point through certain movies we started realizing that there's things you can do with black and white that you can't do with color, and obviously Roma came out this year, so it's a tradition that I think is going to continue. I don't think it's ever going to fully go away, because there's always going to be filmmakers and cinematographers who see the beauty in it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And but that's something I didn't realize when we did it. For me, it was like, okay, Anton, when we worked on it, it was like, oh, okay, this is the story, good, we do black and white, good. And what I realized then is when the film came out and caught so much attention, how everybody wants to shoot black and white. I think any filmmaker you talk to, at some stage in their life, they want to do a black and white film.
Oh yeah. And like I said, your movie Control is just so beautiful. I mean, obviously the story itself, the directing,
Mm.
every aspect of it, but it all sort of feels like it works together. Like I couldn't imagine that movie being in color. There's just something about that story and the way it's delivered, especially the setting, where it's just very bleak and very sort of hard. And that's why every time a quality black and white movie comes out, it sort of inspires the next one to say, you know what, that was amazing. Let me go do my version of it.
Mm. True.
Yeah. Now, Harry Brown and Control were both sort of in these specific locations where it's not necessarily exotic. When you did The American with George Clooney in
Mm.
Italy, it's one of the most beautiful places in the world, one of the most historic places in the world. It's, definitely a different experience. But the movie was very intense, and the intensity that you captured sort of feels like Taxi Driver, sort of feels like a decrepit Lower East Side in Manhattan of the 70s, but you're shooting in such a beautiful area. What was the process to sort of take this beautiful exotic location and turn it into this sort of gritty, intense thriller?
Yeah, I think it's not that dissimilar because it's the same director as Control, but
Hmm.
it's another lonely man. It's a quite bleak area of Italy because we shot in Abruzzo, and
Hmm.
the town we shot in was, there were so many empty houses because a lot of people moved away. There's nothing, there's not
Hmm.
work there, but the landscape is spectacular,
Hmm.
but it's quite lonely area.
Hmm.
So once again, I love when I go to places. I love to take in how it is and make that part of it. So when we went into the night work there, we looked again. I was basically extending a little bit of what was there, and we worked with those colors of the night, and then the day is. The landscape gives a lot of it. It's more like we approached it. Anton wanted to approach it more like a western, and I think that's probably what gives the soul to it, the loneliness and the roughness of the area.
Hmm.
And
And it's interesting because Taxi Driver is also sort of designed like a Western, even right
yeah,
down to the cowboy boots, sort of this Shane type movie, this quiet loner who comes from nowhere.
yeah, that's true.
When you're filming in a place like Italy in this sort of little classic village, personally you're spending time in these places. How does it start to affect you as compared to, filming Harry Brown in these sort of dilapidated housing projects? Does it, what kind of personal experience do you have when you're on location filming these movies, and in any way does it come across into your work when you're filming?
Um, that's an interesting question. Um, well, Control was. I had done only one movie before, and that was a disaster. It was a German film which nobody has ever seen, and it was a tough one. It was produced badly, and it ended a lot of relationships basically. And after that, I thought I don't want to do it again, because I'm doing a lot of music videos, and I
Hmm.
used to do music videos, not anymore. Now more commercials in between the long projects,
Hmm.
and so when Anton asked me to do Control, I was like, yes, of course. That's I want to do this. And when we went to Nottingham, we shot it in Nottingham mainly, and a little bit in Macclesfield. That's the areas of England I didn't know, and we were so focused on making this film. It was basically, it didn't really matter. We were working with the crew. I didn't know anybody of the crew, so it was all new people except for me and Anton, um, who we had done like 10 music videos together or something like that. And um, we were so focused on it. It really was like, also there was not that much to do in Nottingham. It became like a monastery thing where we were
Hmm.
just so concentrated on that. And it's a little bit similar in Italy because in those villages there was not much going on, and we were just purely invested into making this film. And I loved both of those experiences. Now, when we did Harry Brown, we were shooting in London. Oh, it was, yeah. I was staying with the director. He invited me to his house, so I stayed with him all the time. And again, we were so focused on making this film. I don't know. Our exterior blends away a little bit. I'm not like, I cannot, you know, even if we're in London, I cannot do parties or restaurants and all of that while I'm doing a film. Just the work consumes you so much.
No, I definitely understand that sort of. It's, with the shooting schedule, it's such a condensed experience where, the slightest thing that goes wrong can be a domino effect and cause other things to go wrong. I was actually talking to Vanya Sunyul. He was the DP on Crazy Rich Asians and TV shows like 30 Rock and The Deuce. And he said after he finishes a movie or a project, he would actually physically get sick. He would like get a cold or a flu or something, just as a sort of like withdrawal from the project.
Yeah.
Is there anything similar that you experience when finishing a project?
No, I don't have that. Yeah, I that thing where you come back to life, to your regular life, and it takes a little bit of to get used to it. I have that, but I don't have that getting ill after a shoot. Fun fact with Vanya, he did Crazy Rich Americans with the same gaffer I used on 4 films.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, look at that. It's a small world.
It's Julian White, and I did the American with him, and Control. I met him on Control. And we did the American, we did Page 8 and Harry Brown together.
Do you notice that a lot, sort of, quality people who help out on projects, you see them popping up on other projects that you sort of know are going on around the same time? Is there sort of like that family experience where you just see everyone working on each other's projects?
Yeah, maybe a little bit, because I don't know, maybe we've done it all long enough to,
Yeah, sort of the cream just rises to the top for, anybody who's worked that long already. You actually have a huge project coming up. George Clooney's Catch-22, a miniseries, I believe, for Hulu.
Yeah.
Very anticipated, and it's very different from anything I feel you've done before. It's this big sort of World War II epic, but it's not the traditional war story. Anyone who's read the book Catch-22, it's a satire. There's a lot of humor to it.
Yeah.
How do you go about sort of balancing the humor and the setting, which is clearly World War II and terrifying? How do you visually try to keep a balance to keep an audience both sort of feeling the intense experience, but also having the ability to laugh when they're supposed to?
I don't know. That one of the great things of Control, I think, is that even with all the heavy weight of the story and the drama of it, and that's Anton, and that was the screenwriter. There's these moments where the boys have fun and where they talk about farts and where you laugh with them. And I think it's really important that you have these moments where people can be, where there is a little bit of relief in between. You don't have that on Harry Brown, I have to admit. But
yeah, there's not too many laughs in that one.
No, but I think it's. I don't think that way. I feel like when I read the scripts for Catch-22, there was funny stuff in there already on paper. So it's not like I have to do that. It's more the screenwriter gives that to you, and you just have to maybe not get in the way of it. Comedy is tricky because sometimes if you do too much, you might just destroy it. You might just overdo the moment. But that's something you need to figure out with the director. Yeah. They released the trailer yesterday, by the way. I don't know if you saw that.
What's that?
They released the teaser or trailer.
Yeah. I mean, it's highly anticipated. I'm very much looking forward to it, and the fact that it's being done as a mini series, I find very interesting because you know, we mentioned the Coen brothers before. I believe it was Joel Coen recently said the reason why they're sort of averse to television is because with movies there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, but you don't really get that with television because, you know, you have a season and then another season and another season. So you have a beginning, a middle, and then it sort of just keeps going. But with a mini series, you're sort of recreating that beginning and middle and end that you get with a movie. What was it like working with knowing that it's going to be an episodic piece?
I think it was good because also if you read the book, the book is not doesn't have a beginning, a middle part, and an end because it has scenes. It has a lot of scenes and there is a lot of moments, and so the miniseries allowed to maintain a lot of that, and you know we knew that. Of course, there was the Mike Nichols film. We've seen that, and then they roughen it up a little bit and they make their very own version, very 70s version of it. And we wanted to go back to the original book, and I think this version is closer to the original book. Obviously, different filmmakers' choices on many things, but I think one of the things we said is this should be funny. This should be mayhem when it's in the air. And if you don't get the air work, if you don't get those fights they go into when they go on their missions, we don't get them scary, then the whole struggle of our main character to get out of the Air Force becomes like a lame thing. So we were trying to contrast basically the world whenever they go on a mission in their planes, contrast that very heavy to whatever happens in the base, in the camp, or when they go to Rome.
Yeah, and a project like this feels like, because of just the sheer size of it, that there obviously would be some sort of CGI work or some sort of work in post. Is that sort of a new direction? I mean, for a lot of cinematographers and filmmakers in general, it seems sort of going forward that it's unavoidable to have computers involved in the process of manipulating the image.
Yeah.
As someone whose role is to capture the image, how do you feel the marriage between computers, digital technology, and what you're doing? What's going to be the future of cinematography?
No, I like it because it allows you to tell stories which, which are otherwise rough to tell. But I think what you have to do is you have to be very careful and cautious about it, and work together with people in a team. See, that's why, for example, I like to do commercials or music videos. I like to do that because I could practice a lot, and I have, big background, or I've done complicated things in that area. And when I go to film like this, I know that you got to start with planes in the air. If you have everything CGI, people will notice that. But we without a computer, we couldn't have shown a squadron in the air because there's not enough B-25s today to show them. But with some real planes in the air, you don't have the planes doing stupid stuff like sometimes when you see old planes doing CGI stuff, they move like no old plane would move. So we were very cautious about that, and we would try to get it as real as possible.
Now, when working with different filmmakers, you mentioned working with Anton on some projects and George Clooney on this one, and you've worked with auteurs. George Clooney, who started as an actor, developed into this filmmaker who's definitely at the level of an auteur. How much trust is there in terms of, picking focal length, setting up shots, figuring out where's the camera going to go? How much of that is on your shoulders, and how much of that is sort of on the director's shoulders with the people you've worked with?
That's so different. Every director, every project is different. But I think somebody like George, for example, is a good example because he's very visual, and he's also very because he's done it for so long. He knows how, when a camera moves in relation to an actor, where he, how he wants it, and he's very able to choreograph scenes. And I did a film with Ewan McGregor as a director, and we spoke about every scene, and we shortlisted the whole film. But then when we started shooting, because he's also playing the lead, he was like, it was very trustful. And I think, first of all, if the director doesn't trust you, it's terrible to do a movie with him. And you, because then you constantly feel challenged, and then it's not a good environment. But people were trusting me so far, and that was good. And I love, for me, my role is basically to help the director make his film the way he wants it, and then add to that. And then that's what I love doing. So I'm not like trying to push my vision through against somebody. That's not my style. But that also leaves. Also, it's more interesting for me because it leads me to do something like Control, and then do something like Harry Brown, which are films which feel so different. And or Page 8 with David Hare. David Hare, for example, he was not interested. He told me David Hare was. I don't know. You know David Hare. David Hare is a screenwriter. He's a playwright, and he's directed a few things, but not that much. And he would totally trust me, and he would say, he would rehearse with the actors, and then turn to me and say to the actors, "Oh, this is great, this is great." And then he would turn to me and say, "Martin, you have any idea how we shoot this?" And then we'll say, "Yeah." And then I would come up with something. That's different with somebody like George, because he's such a pro on set. He would be, this is what I want to do, and this is what I need, and what do you think? And then you start a dialogue. And
Are there any focal lengths when like setting up master shots that you tend to lean towards? I know Roger Deakins mentioned, obviously you use the whole gamut of lenses, but he said generally he starts off or thinks about in terms of a 32 millimeter. Is there anything that you find yourself thinking about?
I love the 32. 32 is a beautiful lens. I don't like to go very wide on the wide spectrum, but a 25 for a wide shot, a 32 for a wide shot is good, a 75 for a close-up is good, and then sometimes you stray from it. That's for spherical lenses, and then maybe for anamorphic, a 50 is a beautiful lens for anamorphic. That's a universal lens. You can do so many things with on anamorphic.
Speaking of anamorphic, I mean, again, that's another, because of film, all these things that the audience is used to seeing came out for certain reasons. But now with digital cameras, I mean, you don't really need, with 4K, 8K, whatever it is, you don't need the anamorphic lenses the way it was used before to sort of maximize the film strip. What do you think is going to be the future in terms of the battle between anamorphic and S35 as a result of digital filmmaking?
I don't think S35 is relevant anymore, because most of digital cameras are Super 35 size. I feel like what also happened. I think what happened with digital is that people used more anamorphic lenses because they have more character. So sometimes, to get away from the digital cleanness or the perfection of the image, a lot of people would use more anamorphic lenses. Like Panavision would say, the C series is booked out more than ever, because a lot of shows and also with streaming services, there's less fighting against widescreen formats. You could use it more and use older lenses more. So I think people started using more anamorphic lenses rather than S35. And then there's still people shooting film. And you know, my last movie on film was Run All Night, and that's 6 years ago. I shot a couple of commercials on film, but I haven't used film recently.
Yeah, it seems film is sort of going the way of black and white, where if it's being used, it's for an artistic reason as opposed to just availability. You mentioned the cleanness of digital and older lenses. The big debate is, you know, because Cook Pancro is making a big comeback. I believe they're actually reissuing the older lenses rehoused. In your
Yeah.
mind, where would you go, Cook Pancro or the Zeiss Standard Prime set, the standard speed set?
The standard speed I never used. I rarely use them. I always use. I still love Cook S4s. I use Cook Pancro, not Cook Pancro. I use the Panavision version of that for counterpart. Very old lenses and very flawed lenses. They had a lot of mistakes, but I loved it because it gave more character. And that, I think that a lot of people have been doing that. Now with the larger chips, maybe it's interesting because there's not so many old lenses around. But I know that you know, they try not to go too perfect with the new larger formats, but that will be interesting to see.
Yeah, I mean, digital is sort of, it's gotten to a point where now it's the standard, and it feels like a lot of people are trying to figure out how do you take this technology, which made it so much easier to make a movie, but still have it look sort of what we're used to seeing a movie looking like.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now,
they do. But
in
I think, sorry, but I think it's nice. Deacon said he doesn't care what he shoots on because, you know, he did Hail Caesar on film, and then he did all the other stuff on digital recently, and he could do either or. Lubetsky says, why would you shoot film anymore? And then there's people like, you know, Chris Nolan, who does everything on film. So I think they're all great filmmakers and they all do very rich stuff. So for me, it was like, I would shoot a film on film if there's a space for it. But if it gives me less possibility to move the camera, or if it gives me, you know, maybe 5 days less to shoot things, then I would probably go digital again.
Especially since most people, it seems, are watching everything on their cell phones anyway now. I don't know how much the audience can even notice differences, or if any of us can really notice differences, if it's just a sort of psychosomatic effect. How does that make you feel that these sort of big, great movies designed for you know, the big screen, a lot of times they're just being seen by people on a subway headed to work on, you know, something that's a few inches big in the palm of their hand?
I don't know. That's what it is. I think it's it's a bit scary. It's interesting. It's scary. It's good and bad because, you know, I signed up for Netflix because I hadn't a couple of months ago, and then I watched a few things on there, and I find it interesting and weird because everybody watches on their own. So everybody watches individually. You could do it on your phone. You know, I spoke to a friend. She said in her family, everybody was watching. They were all watching their thing, but everybody watches on their own. So it's an individual experience, and it's not like, it's different when you sit in a cinema and you see it all together, and you realize you experience something with other people in the room. I think it's just much more intense. And then when you see it in the cinema, you realize, yes, Dunkirk was shot on film, and it looks different than digital. It looks different than whatever Revenant is, and it feels different. And there might be good reason for that.
Yeah, it's crazy to say, but there was a particular movie I watched, and I saw it a few times, and I wasn't big on it, but then I had the opportunity to watch it in the theater. And there's something about watching a movie in the theater that I believe you're forced to reinvest into it, that you look at it differently, and that's, the jokes become funnier because you sort of know you're supposed to be there for a certain experience, as opposed to, we all sit at home as if we're kings on our throne watching something saying, entertain me. So I do feel there's a difference, and I'm curious what's going to be the future of visual storytelling now that the target audience isn't necessarily a theater full of people, but someone sitting on a subway, someone sitting by themselves in a living room, trying not to get them to go into their phone 5 minutes into the movie.
Yeah, well, and to sit through a movie rather than to pause, do
Hmm.
something else, come back. Oh, yeah, let me get that phone call and then I'll be back. And it's a different thing. But that's the part where I feel like it's interesting, scary a little bit because George recently said whatever he thinks. No, I don't know. Certain things would just not be made right now as a movie anymore, and you see the movies which are out there are not that. I don't know. They're not something like Control wouldn't be made anymore,
Hmm.
probably.
Well, maybe not for theaters, but there's something about Netflix and Amazon. I feel they're all experimenting the way Hollywood used to experiment, like in the 70s or in the 90s, where it was, let's try different things and see what sort of works. I mean, I personally believe there's going to be a resurgence. There's always ebbs and flows. I mean, the Hollywood system almost collapsed in the 60s and then came
True.
back in the 70s. The only difference is, there were always theaters, and now with a lot of theaters closing down, the question is going to be, when people do come out to watch this stuff, where is it going to be? Because, you go to a movie theater now, pretty much everything is a superhero movie. But if you turn on TV, I mean, you have True Detective, you had House of Cards, you had Orange is the New Black, The Deuce. It's stuff that traditionally we would see in movie theaters.
Yes, but then at the same time, I have the feeling it's so much out there, and it's trying to hook you for 10 hours to a screen.
Hmm.
That's whatever season length is
Yeah.
on those shows, and and I don't see. There's also something what you said. Well, you quoted Coen Brothers saying
Hmm.
there's a start, there's a middle, there's
Hmm.
an end, and I don't find it too pleasing not to have that.
I
And
agree.
I
And that's
love
why I
the
love Harry
stories where
Brown,
it's yeah,
because it's one of those movies where once the movie ends, that's when the moment starts of you thinking about it. And you can't
yeah,
stop thinking about it. And with a TV show, you get another season, so you don't have to think about it. It thinks for you. But once the movie ends, it sort of infects you, and you keep thinking about it and thinking about it, and you don't know any more than what you already have. And that's why, personally, I want to thank you for filming some of the most beautiful footage out there. I know, especially a movie like Control is a big inspiration on me. And I look forward to see the other things that you do. I look forward to Catch 22, and thank you for chatting with me today. I mean, it's very interesting to watch something that's inspired you in the past, and to be able to pick the brain of someone who sort of put it together. And I have to ask, when you're filming a movie like Control or
mm,
all these projects, do you feel like you're creating something special at the time, or is it sort of like the saying goes, you don't realize you're in the middle of a storm when you're standing in the middle of it?
no Control. I didn't realize that. I thought we had moments on set where we knew this is really touching, where we had people in tears and stuff. Um, because actors performed a certain way and certain things come together. You have moments on set where you feel like this is special, but you don't know what it means yet. And then Control, I didn't know. I didn't know. And also, it's like, um, I don't know, we had limited money, limited possibilities. Anton was, the great thing about Anton is he's a real artist and he took a stand. And when he saw something, we very often did only one or two takes of things. And because he thought That's it. I've seen it. That's the scene. I like it. And he was, not shy doing that. And I loved it. It was fascinating and it was strong and rarely seen. But yeah, no, I didn't
Awesome.
realize it was special.
Awesome. Well, here's me saying it. I'm sure you've heard it many times. It's very special. So thank you again. And thank you
Thank
for
you.
joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for, I don't know, thank you for the interest in the work. Thank you for noticing all of these details.
Oh, we all notice, believe me. And when the next generation comes out and makes their movies, it's going to look a certain way, and you're going to be a reason for that because of your work. So
Thank you.
thank you, and again, I look forward to seeing Catch 22. It's coming out
Yeah,
on Hulu, and of course,
May.
anything else you do in the future, I'll be one of the first in line to watch it.
Thank you.